So the first thing we need to do is navigate over to the templates. So we're going to go to our group that we created previously, the 6300-VSF. We're going to click on devices. We're going to click on switches. And once we can see our switches up, and we're going to click on config. Now from the configuration view, we can see our templates where we would add our templates in, which I'll show in just a second. So there's two parts to this, two parts to our templates. There's the templates themselves, and there's variables. So both of these make up how to create templates in Central. So from this screen, we would add our template here, which I'll do in a moment. And then from the variables screen, we can create variables. As you can see, I have a list of variables here, and then we can upload them. We can actually download a sample file either with JSON or a CSV file, and then we can upload that in whatever desired format that we want to use. But the list of variables that we can add to the template can be either JSON or CSV. Now, part of a template is a common configuration for a group of devices, which is the configuration group 6300 VSF. With those multiple devices, though, not every device is going to have the same configuration. I mean, of course, you don't want every device to have the same IP address because you'd have all kinds of havoc going on in the network. So we use variables to be able to add in different lines of configuration to the devices where we would expect it to have different configuration, such as maybe IP addresses, maybe specific ports that are connected via uplinks. Maybe the devices run the similar configuration but have different port counts. So we can use variables to account for all that. So with the variables, there's different ways that we can handle the variables, as I just mentioned. We can use JSON, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation, or a CSV file, which is comma separated values. The differences between the two, if we look at it, so here's an example of a CSV file. Everything's here in a nice little grid, and we can enter our devices down the list. And then what comes with this template are these variables that start out with a underscore. That indicates that that variable is a system variable and is predefined in the template. If we want to add variables, we can then just keep adding columns here of the specific variables that we want to use. So in this case, we're assigning an IP gateway, a VLAN IP, so this would be our IP address. The switch would connect out to Central. So this would be a different value for each switch that we would add into the sheet. We would indicate the port numbering that we want for our VSF links, as well as the SKU for the VSF member type. So if we're going to modify the template, we need to make sure modified is changed from no to yes. By default, the serial number and MAC address will be populated let's go back to the central screen. When you download a sample variables file, the serial, the MAC, and potentially the host name will all be filled out automatically for you. But as you add more devices in, these would all have different values. So each template, each CSV file must have the serial number, the MAC address, and the host name in this modified command. If you're running a stack, it will populate the sysstack command. These other variables would be for additional purposes, for additional settings that we want to configure within the template. The JSON file, similar values, but it's just a different format. If you're familiar with JSON programming or Ansible, we would see that the format is laid out differently. So if you have a programming mind or want to use this in an automated fashion, you could use the JSON template as a way to import the values into Central. So those are the differences between the two ways that we can handle variables in Central. It's important to note this variable list that I'm showing is for a 2-member stack. So you don't really need to add the second member in. because the way VSF it works in CX, you'll already have the stack provisioned. So you just need to bring the first switch into Central, but you have to have the subscription applied to the second switch, but it'll automatically show up as a stack. Once we're finished with our desired variables, we can upload the variables file here into Central and then select the file, and it will automatically upload and populate this list of variables in the variable list here. So then we need to make sure those match the template. So now that we have our variables uploaded, we need to create a template. So let's go to the template screen, and then we're going to click the add screen here, and we'll give this template name the same as the group name. We want to specify the device type as Aruba CX. The model, this will be 6300s. If we want to get specific to the group, the template group, we can specify a specific SKU for that. For this purpose, it doesn't matter, so we're just going to leave it all. And if we wanted to restrict the version of firmware, we can do that as well, but we'll leave that as all. And then we click next, and then we can import our configuration. So what we'll have to do is build a golden template first, and then we can paste it in here. And as new switches come in, we can automatically push the template to those. So I already have my golden template configured. So I'm going to copy that into the template window. Now notice in the template here, I have my variables set up. So basically here I have my host name will be a variable. So if I had 100 devices, I would expect to have 100 rows of host names configured in my CSV file. I variabilized the VSF members because they might have different port counts, and so I would need to specify that in the variables. So the type is the SKU that we saw in the CSV file. We can also use if and else statements, if and end if statements in the template logic. So if this VSF member contains link 1, then it would add in the link 1 value that we have specified in the template, and then end from there. If it also has a VSF member link 2, then it would add the link 2 configuration into that. Because we have a 2-member stack, only one VSF link is supported, but you can have multiple ports for redundancy. And so in this case, it would just execute to here and then enter that into this configuration. Same thing for member 2. If there's a VSF link for member 2, it would add in the member 2 link and then end the logic. So that's one way of how variables and logic work within a template. And so that's what it looks like, how it's configured into Central. So once we're done with that, we can save the template, and then the template is automatically pushed to the switch as long as once we first configure the first switch into the group. So we first have to manually paste this template in. Once that first switch is configured, as other switches come online, the template will automatically push to them. One thing to note is that there's a discrepancy between the password between the CX switch and Central. So for now, you have to put the password in Central as plain text. Not to worry though, because that only has to deal with the template to the switch. The communication between the switch and Central or your computer and Central is all over SSL and is encrypted. So then once we've saved that, we can push the template to the switch, and then we can go to Configuration Audit. And this is already pushed, but if we had any errors, we would see that. So let's go back and make an error. Let's change the variables here so that we can show that the switch, that Central processes all those variables that we've uploaded. So I'm going to take one of the percent signs in, so I'm going to artificially put an error into this, and I'm going to save it. And when I do that, the system is going to push that template, and it's going to either list errors here or list failed or pending changes here. So what I can do is I can refresh the screen, and then it'll show any failed or pending errors on the device. So it shows here we have a failed or pending change, so then I can click on the link and I can view the config difference, and it says the host name is not compliant with RFC 1123. So I know that that's working. I know that it's parsing through the variables. So what I can do is I can go back to templates. Whoops. Back to templates here. Click on the edit. And I can go back and add that parentheses or the percentage sign back into the template. Then I will click save. And I can go back to configuration audit. And we can see there's a pending change, so view the difference. So now we see there's no more error messages, so right now it's pending, so it's being pushed via the API to the switch. So I can close it, and after a while, we can check it again. After a while, this will be 0. So if I change the tab, go back to configuration audit, and we can see it's 0. So the change that I've made has been saved. So now if we go back to the template, so we know that this is good now. We know that we have it saved onto the switch and that the template push was successful. So failed or pending changes will show here. So even if it's pending, you'll click the link, log into it, and if there's no error messages, you just see the running config, you'll know that it's pending the push. And then once it's completely pushed, it will either show there's one device, click on the link and it'll show an error, or if it passed the template processing, it will just show it'll just show that there's no devices that have failed or are pending changes. If there are any errors specific to the template, it'll show here, and then you can click on the link and view any template errors with that.
So in addition to working with templates, in AOS-CX 10.7, we came out with the ability to auto-stack our VSF stack members, which makes it a lot easier when onboarding a stack into Central, as we saw with earlier in our video series with UI groups. Let's take a look at how this is done with templates. So here I have my group ready to go, and I have my template assigned here. So one of the key things to understand with auto stacking, especially with templates, is that we need to provision the stack first in the template for the link, both the member, the type of member that's going to be, so you need the J number, what the member is going to be, and then the VSF links that are going to be used, the ports that are going to be used. So then once you're done with that, you can cable up your stack, have all the switches powered off, and then we can power them on one by one. So now that we have our template ready to go, we can go to our stack, and I'm just simulating powered off using the Service OS. So I'm just going to log into the Service OS, and I'm going to zeroize to make sure that the switch is completely factory defaulted. So then the switch is going to reboot. It will join Central. It's already licensed and ready to go in Central. It'll join Central after it's finished rebooting, and then we can assign the switch into a group. So let's go ahead and let this reboot, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so now that our switch is rebooted, let's check to see if it is in Central. We can assign it to a group. So we'll go to our group configuration. Okay, and here's our switch here. So we can move that into our template group. And we want to confirm that we want to move it over there. So this is just the conductor. The other two are still powered off. So we can go to our group, and we can check on devices, go to switches, and we can see our switch is now online. So if we actually go into the switch, we can log into it. So once we log into our switch, we can do a show VSF, and we can see that the other two members are provisioned, and all they need to do is reboot and join the stack. So we'll go ahead and reboot our next member. Okay, so after the switch comes up from a factory default state, it will detect the VSF links from the conductor, and then it will reboot so that I can reboot as a VSF member. So this will be member 2 or the standby. So let's go ahead and let it reboot again. Okay, now that the member is rebooted, we can come back to our conductor and check, and we can see that it is now present as the standby. So let's go ahead and boot our third member. Same process, we'll let this reboot, and then it'll come up again. Okay, and after the last switch reboots, it's going to also see the VSF links and reboot to join as a VSF member. Alright, and then once the final switch comes up, we can refresh our VSF, and now our stack is fully formed. And if we check the configuration, we can see that our template has been pushed, and we have all our configuration from Central. So that's how to onboard a stack using templates in Aruba Central. And make sure you have at least AOS-CX 10.7 or later on the switch. Thank you very much for watching this video.